Everyone always thought I was gay because I was really into theater. I don't know, I just liked the art of theater. I went broke, completely broke. And at that point, I was just kicked out of school. I was not good at sales yet. I was working my ass off for it. During the week, I was cold calling, doing SDR work. I was trying to keep my head afloat there. So I worked 80 hours a week at some point and made barely 2K a month while I was working my ass off because I was doing everything at the same time. And I think that's a mistake a lot of people made. Instead of doing one thing really good, do a lot of things just to keep your head afloat. And that's a mistake I made, but it's also where I learned a lot. From selling mints in primary school to selling dog food on markets. This is the first Digital Nomad podcast that I will do alone, and we'll dive into my own story. So I prepared some notes, I prepared some things, and I have honestly no clue how this will go, but we'll see. And by the end, you know the host of Digital Nomad podcast, which is me, a little bit better. I'm a 22-year-old digital nomad. At the moment, I am in Valencia, in Spain. I will be back in Amsterdam by the end of this week for 2 weeks. Then I will go to some other countries that I will keep a secret for now, but follow this channel and you will follow that as well. And there I will have amazing guests and amazing new stories to tell. Because the goal of this podcast, I think I've honestly never mentioned it. I only mention it to people that I pitched on the podcast to come on the podcast, is to share stories and let people see what's possible. Because what I found out is that when you're traveling as a digital nomad, and especially as an entrepreneur or a young entrepreneur, or however you want to call yourself, it's that entrepreneurs have really cool stories. And entrepreneurs who travel also have really cool stories, but you never hear those stories of the entrepreneurs who actually travel because they're always traveling. So then I thought, how cool would it be to have a podcast that you have while traveling, where you share the stories of the entrepreneurs that would else never share their stories, but have the results to back up the stories. And that's how this whole podcast came to life, to let people see what's possible through sharing stories. And now it's time to share mine. Because when I was younger, I grew up in a small town near Amsterdam. Americans would say it's a suburb of Amsterdam. And it was nice. I'm the youngest of 3, so I have 2 older brothers. And I was always a bit of a hustler. So in primary school, I found out that when you buy a pack of 4 rolls of mints in the supermarket for €1, and you would sell them to your classmates for €1 each, that you would have €3 of profit. So that's when I had my first little mint business, where I helped my classmates smell better with their breath. It was, I think I made €20 in total, and I had 3 customers, but then school found out and thought it was not a good idea to let people spend their pocket money on mints that they buy for way too much money in class. Yeah. So that was one of my first hustles, actually. And then after that, after primary school, I went to high school. And in high school, I always, I did my thing, but I was a really insecure kid. But I think every kid was quite insecure in high school. I always had that need for approval, and honestly, really deep, really quick. I sometimes still have that need for approval. Maybe that's why I'm standing in front of a camera or recording a podcast right now, because I still have that need for approval or seeking validation or whatsoever. I have an appointment with a therapist about that. First appointment with a therapist ever next week. So again, really personal, really quick, but that's okay. And yeah, so I was a really insecure kid in primary school, in high school actually. I always was this weird outsider. I was really into theater, so everyone always thought I was gay because I was really into theater. I don't know, I just liked the art of theater. And outside of school, I had different groups of friends, and I was not gay, and I still am not gay. Uh, and I just did my own thing actually. And theater for me in high school was the place where I felt accepted and could do my own thing. It was the place where I could express myself. And in high school, I also had one really good friend who is still my best friend till today, and that's Fabio, actually. And Fabio is right now, he's my business partner with Clarity Cross Consulting, where we help expert founders make more money and spend less time on their business. But that's not for now. But yeah, what's really amazing about that friendship with Fabio and still is, and till this day, when we were in high school, he always supported me, no matter what. When I had some weird theater play, he was there to support me. And I don't know, in one way, we shared this same fascination for the future. We shared the fascination of always thinking of what the future could be like, always having some kind of silent ambition without really putting in any type of action. Yeah, and until we were 16 years old, 16, 17 years old, we never really put in any type of action. We just talked about it a lot. And that's why I always say to everyone I ever meet and in this podcast and by the end of my videos, take action, because action drives change. If you don't take action on what could be, it will never be. And me and Fabio never took action until today, because now we have a running business. The point is that when we were 16, 17 years old, for some point, he came to me with the stock market. And we thought it was interesting, but we were not allowed to trade on the stock market yet. So from that point on, we had a stockbroker's account, but on his dad's name. So we couldn't buy or sell any stocks. So then at some point we were like 16-year-old stockbrokers calling his dad, Francesco. It was like, Francesco, can you buy KLM stock for this price point? And can you sell it at this price point? And it was during COVID, but before that, even I think we in Netherlands should finish high school, at least the high school that I was in, around 16 years old. And then you need to go to an extended version of high school, because I wasn't a smart cookie, so I couldn't finish high school where you immediately can go to university. I just went to like an extended version of high school. It's a weird system in the Netherlands. It also would have been done when I was 18, 19 years old, but I was not. So my extended version of high school was a theater school, actually. I did audition, and there did like 300 people did audition or something, and only 30 came through. And I remember I was rehearsing everything. I couldn't dance at all, and I was rehearsing the dances in my room, and I was practicing singing. I even took singing classes, and I'm the worst fucking singer ever for that audition, because I wanted to get into theater school, and there was no plan B in my head, and I got in. And it was really nice. And there, even though in theater school I could be dancing and singing and learning and finding myself in deeper artistic ways, because that's what you do there, I still was quite the outsider, actually, because I was a commercial guy. I was interested in the stock market. I thought it was interesting. Stock market, let's go buy stocks, sell stocks, and do things like that. And um, that's not that common when you're in theater school, to also be interested in the stock market and be really commercial and at some point want to make a shit ton of money. And theater is not the best way to make a shit ton of money, though. But that's not the point. Um, so even in theater school, I was the outsider among the outsiders, and they had this saying in my class. They say you got left, you got right, and you got job. And you can go left, you can go right, but Job always does his own thing. He just goes his own way. He's just like, his brain is wired in a weird fucking direction that whatever you can do, it's just, he does what he does and just let him do his thing. And then it's fine. And that was quite hard to manage at that point because I thought I found my tribe with the outsiders in theater school. And there I still did not find my tribe, but it wasn't really about finding my tribe. It was more about accepting myself for who I am and for who I was at that certain point, because that was why I took it as an insult that they always said, you got left, you got right, and you got job. I hated that fucking saying. I hated it with all my heart. But I didn't dare to say it, but they didn't mean it in a bad way. They just meant it in a way that I was unique and I always went my own way and had my own humor, and that's what they liked. But I saw it as an insult because I wanted to be like others. I wanted to be part of a group. And when you got left and you got right and you got that meant you were not part of a group. And that's what I wanted. But it took a really, really, really long time, literally till the end of theater school, for myself to accept that I am my own person. I'm still struggling with that, like some fucking deep nestles high in insecurities. And then again, I will see a therapist about that, but that's not the problem for now. So that was in theater school, and that was my first theater school. And then I was done. I was roughly 18, 19 years old, 18 years old. And then I wanted to do my bachelor degrees because I finished my extended version of high school. And then in 11th, you have your bachelor degrees, and that's like your university or the start of your university. I started in my second theater school, and it was in theater education. So to become a theater teacher. And I've done some teaching on the side, like teaching small children how to express and how to do dumb stuff and say like, I'm a bottle of Coke right now. And then it was funny times. So I taught theater to little children for a while. And then from that point on, I also started to came in contact with sales, actually. And when I started to came in contact with sales, there's also this self-development journey that comes along with it. And so I started to wake up really early. I started to wake up at 5 and then go to the gym in the morning before I could go to school. And then after gym, I started reading a book. And I did that for months. And I started taking more responsibility. I paid a friend €1,000 to teach me how to sell and to teach me sales. But in the end, that was not really a friend because that's a story for another time. But like he let me pay him €1,000 and then he would teach me how to sell because he was a good salesperson. That's why he let me pay him €1,000 because he was a good salesperson. Um, and then I just wasn't focused on theater anymore because theater is amazing. I love the art of theater still to the core. I love dancing. I love physical movement. I love theater, writing stories, writing spoken words. I love analyzing texts on hip hop. I love all of it. I love the weirdness that comes with theater. I love everything about theater. But the people in theater are mostly exhausting because who guessed? They're really dramatic and quite toxic. They want to be seen, they want to be heard. All the problems that I had myself as well, of course. Like, not done there. But they are professional victims. they love to victimize themselves. They never take responsibility for their actions. They never take responsibility for the results, at least in the school where I was. And if some people of that see this, fuck you, take responsibility for your life. I don't give a shit because I love my life right now. My life's amazing. But they did not take responsibility. When I was in that self-development journey, and maybe some of you know this, that when you're in that journey and people are around you stay the same, it's quite hard. It's quite, I wouldn't say toxic, but you see things from a different angle. And when you go down the rabbit hole of self-development and taking responsibility, and that comes along with sales, you want to do better and you try to get better, you try to become better. And not everyone is like that. And especially I was roughly 19, 20 at that certain point in my life. 20, I think. Maybe I just turned 20. And people around me are drinking, smoking, a lot of weed, doing drugs and everything. And I used to do a lot of weed and drank a lot of as well because I was a student, of course. But when I made that switch, I already was the outsider. And then I became even more of an outsider there. Until at some point I got called to the principal's office because I started calling people on their bullshit. And they decided to kick me out of school. And I was like, what? Kick me out of school? Theater? That was all I knew for the past 6 years. And I was just, okay, sure. I gotta roll with the punches right now. I gotta deal with this. And I go all in sales. So that's what I did. I went all in sales when I just got kicked out of theater school. I had no clue what I was doing. I wasn't good at all. I didn't had any experience, but I just did it. Like, I think at some point I was doing outreach to get a sales job, and I was going on Instagram and I was looking at coaches in the Netherlands, and I was sending all of them DMs, like 30 to 40 coaches a day. I would send a DM like, "Hey, I'm a starting sales rep. I want to start on a sales opportunity and sell, and this is what I can do and this is what I will do." And like, I tried to sell myself into a sales position as a closer for coaches without any real experiences, without being really good or anything. And I got one, a really, really bad one. But I wasn't skilled. So I had no clue what I was doing. And it was just, I was just doing stuff. I was just trying stuff. And at some point I made some commission because it was fully commission based, but it was just enough to make my rent. Just enough to pay my rent, and it was just enough to keep my head afloat. But not enough to feed myself, not enough to do other things except for paying my rent. And I went like broke, like completely broke. And at that point, I was just kicked out of school. I was not good at sales yet, but I was working on it. Like, I was working my ass off for it. And then I needed to live on crackers for 2 months because I did not have money to buy food. I did not had I could only afford my rent. And that's when I need to swallow my pride and start looking for a side job, a side hustle. So I started bartending, and at some point I was bartending at midnight for 3 times a week. I found another side job where I was teaching theater again as a theater teacher, even though I was kicked out of school where I would become a theater teacher. Depends. You don't need a degree to teach theater. That's what we learned here. So I was teaching 4 groups theater at that point, like 4 times a week. No, on Saturday I had like 3 groups, and then on Monday evening I had another group, but also on Friday, Saturday night, and on Thursday night I would be bartending, sometimes on Friday night as well. So I would be bartending 2 to 3 times a week in the evening, like until midnight. So I came home like 5 o'clock. Then I also was teaching theater, and I needed to write like 3 plays. theater plays and need direct everything. And then I also was during the week, I was cold calling. I was cold calling, doing SDR work. I was trying to keep my head afloat there. So I worked 80 hours a week at some point and made just enough to keep my head afloat. I made like barely 2K, barely 2K a month while I was working my ass off because I was doing everything at the same time. And I think that's a mistake a lot of people made. Instead of doing one thing really good, do a lot of things just to keep your head afloat. And that's a mistake I made, but it's also where I learned a lot. And at some point, it was really weird. I was walking through the park in the city that I lived in at that time. It was not Amsterdam, but it was Arnhem, a city near the border of Germany in the Netherlands. And I was walking there through the park with my girlfriend at the time. And uh, then I saw an old friend from my youth. And I used to do athletics when I was a child. And at some point I needed to choose or do athletics or do theater. And then I choose theater and then athletics went away. But I saw him there and he was selling dog food. Like it was a really coincidence. Maybe it was God or it was anything like a higher power above that just gave me a sign. And I was just keeping my head afloat. And I just had a big argument with the manager at the bartending thing because I was upselling shots to everyone who ordered the beer. So because I was into sales, so like, yeah, I need to upsell everyone. I need to sell as much as possible. So that every time people would came to my bar, it's like, yeah, can I order a beer? And like, do you want shots with that? Do you want shots with it? Well, like a really easy upsell to sell shots with beer. But then at some point, my manager got really, really, really angry at me because everyone was way too drunk at the bar. Because I was upselling shots all the time. And we just had that big argument and I needed to come on a talk with him and it's like, fuck. Like I was about to get fired because I was upselling too much shots and was like, I wasn't that focused and I didn't care that much about that bartending job. And at that moment, when I walked into the park and saw that old friend from my youth, like, what are you doing? Yeah, I'm in sales right now. I sell dog food subscriptions, standing on markets, and it's fine. I go all over the Netherlands doing this, and it's quite fun. I learn a lot, and it's like, yeah, okay. And do they still search for people or anything? Because it's okay, a side job makes good money with it, probably, apparently. And then I sent him a text message because I still had his phone number. And it was like, yeah, yeah, cool. I will send you the phone number of the manager. So I sent him a text and came on a solicitation. It's like, yeah, I do this with sales right now and this I'm bartending, but I'm gonna quit there while I was actually getting fired. And I was selling theater and like it was good. And I sold myself into that sales position. That's where I think like my first real sales position came and it was direct sales selling premium dog food subscriptions on markets. And that's really cool because then you were standing in the booth on events and you would go to people and like 200 times a day, like, do you have a dog? Do you have a dog? Do you? And then making a whole conversation about their dog and like, oh, what type of food do you give? And does he have any itches at the feet? And then like dive into the pain. And it's really interesting. That's where I also had one of my best sales mentors that I ever had. And I'm still in really good contact with the guy because he's a fucking genius. And there I learned so much on just being in that direct sales position through wind, through rain, no matter what. Like you show up and you take responsibility for your results and you just be there to perform and to go to people to take action. And I think that's the job. I worked there for 1 year, 1.5 year, selling the premium dog food subscriptions, Butternut Box, the company is called. It's amazing company. They're doing really good. And I loved my time working there. Um, and I earned quite a lot. Like I earned good amount of money to keep my head afloat just by working 3 times a week, mostly in the weekends. I would have my theater, I would do that sales job, and I would do the SDR cold calling thing. And at some point, I landed a remote position as well as a remote closer where I sold marketing software. That's why I landed my sales and marketing consulting job, remote job, selling everything. That's why I also have like a lot of reps in selling software, talking to entrepreneurs, analyzing funnels, and became obsessed with marketing and sales. Then I also found out who Alex Ramosi was. If you don't know who Alex Ramosi is, he is genius, consume everything. Um, yeah, and then I started developing and developing and developing. And at some point, I came at the barrier point that here I had my butternut box, my good job that brought me a good amount of money and everything. And here I had the remote job that brought me more freedom, but a bit less money. And at that point, I decided to quit the butternut box part, the direct sales part, even though I learned a lot there, and it made me 2.5, 3K. Then I had my first 4K months in my life as well. But it was on location, and I didn't want to work location free. I wanted to be free of location because it's Digital Nomad podcast. What do you expect? I'm in Valencia right now. I've been to Bali this year. I've been to Vietnam this year. Like, I love living this remote lifestyle. It's really cool and brings a lot of opportunities. But yeah, and then I had just a remote position. That was good. And I did that for a year as well. So by then I analyzed over 900 funnels, had over 5,000 sales conversations. I think in total I closed over 550 deals right now. That's insane. I've generated over 600,000 euros for all my clients altogether that I worked for as a freelancer, as a remote sales, in a remote sales position, or in a sales position as well. And then came the point where I started traveling and where I took some other risks and just in the end started building. And that's also where the point, almost half a year ago right now, where I started building the company of me and Fabio, where I started doing new partnerships. And that's the thing, like in the end, you amplify your skill sets by stacking them. So the first skill set that I've learned was theater. Why is that a specific skill set? It lets you be creative. It lets you create something out of nothing. And it let me be able to perform, to tell a story, to express in a way. And that really helped me with sales. So then I learned sales. That's like, I always said sales is like psychology with theater. Like, and also when I'm talking to people sometimes like, oh, what kind of questions? You really know how to ask good questions, because are you a psychologist or do you, no, it's just psychology with theater. That's sales. That's how you learn it. You learn how to ask questions. You learn how to listen. The most important part of sales is listening and asking the right questions. And from that point on, like, that's my first skill set. So theater, creating something out of nothing, being creative, being able to improvise and to deal with that, talking in front of a camera like this. And then came the sales part. That's the psychology, human psychology, learning how to ask questions, learning how to sell, how to translate value, how to use certain type of tricks to persuade people when making certain decisions. Just all of that, and how to deal with people. It's like people skills that I learned there. And from sales, I developed marketing. And from marketing, it's how can I translate my sales knowledge into tactics, into strategies. And that's where marketing comes in. And now I have like one of my freelance positions that I have is being a copywriter for ads and they have like a total of 500,000 a month in ad spend for the ads that I write. And I can do that because I learned how to do marketing and I learned how to sell. And copywriting is just selling with words, selling frameworks, writing scripts. That's something I learned with theater, storytelling. So that's what I would recommend everyone, just to stack up your skill sets in a way that makes sense. And from that point, because I knew copywriting, now I am a copywriter. I know marketing, I know sales. And then I came with Fabio. We put our heads together. And it's like, yeah, you're a technical guy. You know a lot about AI. And now we started up our own company, ClarityCraft Consulting, where we do sales and marketing consulting because that's my strong suit. And then Fabio does all the workflows and the backends and AI systems to amplify the sales work and the marketing work that we did to help our clients save time through AI automations and everything like that, and make more money through sales and marketing to actually learn them how to sell. And that's what enrolled out of all of this. But I wasn't able to do that if I hadn't had that whole journey that I just talked about before. Because in the end, everything happens for a reason and it's up to you how to deal with it. As long as you deal with it, as you actually deal with it. That's the most important part. And now it's just, I love doing this podcast. I love meeting people. I love sharing the stories. I love documenting my whole journey that I do on this channel, even though it's really small and I think no one watches. But that's all fine because at some point I will watch this video back and I know my own story. I know where I came from, or when I even have a couple of million in the bank. When I have that, I can watch this video right now in 2025 where I told this story and I can build upon this story and the skill sets that I've built from here so far. And that's what I would recommend everyone as well, is to take action and actually do stuff. So yeah, it's fine. This is my story and this was the Digital Nomad podcast for now. Next time, I think I will have a guest. I'm not sure. And if you like this concept, or if you want to know more about me or my story, or are you interested in certain things, if you have certain questions, like leave it down in the comments because I'm genuinely curious how you like this and if you like this or whatsoever. But that's it for now. Then I would say, visionaries, hope you got something out of this. Take action, and I'll check you out later.